that there was no compelling evidence that this was intentional, right?
Right.
So help our viewers understand, if it's an accident, which most people seem to think it is, why is that a crime?
Because just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal. They didn't mean to do it. They didn't have the intent to kill. But it happened anyway, and it happened because of more than mere negligence, because of they didn't exercise due caution or circumspection. And that's what happened here. Well, that there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set, that there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody was checking those, or at least they weren't checking them consistently. And then they somehow got loaded into a gun, handed off to Alec Baldwin. He didn't check it. He didn't do any of the things that he was supposed to do to make sure that he was safe or that anyone around him was safe. And then he pointed the gun at Helena Hutchins and he pulled the trigger.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Is the Alec Baldwin saga over? Well, Baldwin will actually know his fate in less than 60 days. In other words, it's not over. The law is a slippery snake. Whatever side of it you're on, it seems to be about snakes, ladders, and loopholes. In the Baldwin case, special prosecutors seem to throw in the towel, but actually what they did was simply withdraw to live and fight another day. I mean, sometimes a cowboy finding himself outmatched will do that, right? Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. Bear in mind, I'll be doing a live stream later today where we'll not only interrogate the Corey Richens case, but also how do we begin our investigation? What is the methodology? And how is the methodology of this channel different to any other channel? So it should make for quite interesting discussion. Look out for that at about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're enjoying this episode, you can also hit the thanks button. And let's get started. So before we deal with legalities, it really is a strange irony that Baldwin represents himself in movies as an icon of assertive masculinity. You can have a look at the sort of roles he's taken. And then on the home front, he's also siring babies at the rate of 1 a year. And yet in his mythos of the Rust incident, I'm talking about the not inside the story, the outside of the story, the incident, a character that is supposed to be a wily gunslinger, well, when we see the actor talking to law enforcement and talking to ABC News, he's actually wielding a broken gun and everyone around him is telling him what to do. On the streets of New York, Baldwin was recently seen limping around, having his hip replaced. So which is it? Is he a man to be feared, dripping with testosterone, or is he a mask, all swagger, and underneath that, worthy of our sympathy? Well, that is a question that the prosecutors in this case have got to address, and they are Carrie Morrissey and Jason Lewis. They have dismissed a charge of involuntary manslaughter against the actor without prejudice, writing in a document that new facts were revealed that demand further investigation and forensic analysis. What do you think those new facts are? Well, before we get to that, without prejudice means they can elect to recharge whenever it suits them. And the question is, will they? Another question is, should they? And I did a poll on my channel, and the results were 15% recommended dropping the case against Alec Baldwin. 23%, around about a quarter, said someone else should be charged but not Alec Baldwin. And then about 2/3, 62%, thought that Baldwin should still face charges. To be honest, I was quite surprised at how high that was. Now, according to the Santa Fe New Mexican, a source close to the investigation told news outlets that the new evidence that is being studied at the moment in terms of whether to recharge centers on the revolver, right? The weapon at some point had been fitted with a new hammer, and that seems to be what the whole sort of fuss is about. Fitting it with a new hammer, could this have changed the firing mechanism in a fundamental way. And so what this small little technicality, in a way, this detail, what that did was call into question previous conclusions from the FBI crime lab, that it could not have fired without the trigger being pulled. And so they've sort of abandoned that prosecution, and now they've got new investigators, new prosecutors, and now they're going to, examine this, but with that information as part of the investigation. Will this caveat change the merits of the case? Will it alter the probative value of basically the state's case? Now, an interesting potential caveat to all of this is, if the rumors are true that Gutierrez Reed took the revolver overnight and went plinking with the prop-struck driver, there are potentially two witnesses who might be able to say that within hours of the incident, the revolver was functioning just fine, if the rumors are true. Gutierrez Reed might also be able to weigh in on that, and she might be able to say, on the one hand, it wasn't functioning fine, or on the other, she didn't notice anything. On the other hand, one could argue that excessive use of the revolver could have damaged it. And we know Gutierrez Reed said that when she returned from lunch, she was having difficulty inserting a final round into it. And so you can see there's certainly a kernel of doubt. And is that kernel of doubt reasonable doubt sufficient to make this whole thing a pointless exercise? We can assume from where we are in the narrative that it appears Dave Halls has made or accepted some sort of plea deal with the state. And one wonders what he and Sarah Zachary might be able to say about their colleagues on the set. And that then brings us to the armorer. All along, there's sort of been two elements to this case. One person right at the top of the pyramid, the power pyramid, Alec Baldwin, the person who basically conceived of this production and who stars in the production and who, in a way, co-wrote the whole story. And he's at the top, and then almost at the very bottom, one of the least experienced, lowest paid, least recognized members of the whole staff. She's also kind of part of the investigative crosshairs. So investigators have said that the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, she loaded the gun with 5 dummy rounds on October 21st, but then struggled to add a 6th round before a lunch break when the revolver was locked in a truck. The final round was added after lunch when the gun was cleaned. Gutierrez Reed said that the guns were checked on set, but she didn't really check the revolver too much, meaning the firearm, due to it being locked up at lunch. Now, think about it. If it's true that the gun was cleaned and oiled, and I think what she said specifically was that she tried to clean one chamber, that something seemed to be jammed in the one chamber. Well, it's unlikely something strange occurred with the mechanism. Just think about that. If the gun is cleaned and oiled right before the incident, then can you really blame some kind of detritus, some kind of blockage, some kind of dirt? Although I guess one could potentially argue the converse, that if something was not really working, by cleaning the weapon, it might be more inclined to fall apart. And so I guess one thing the prosecutors could do is take a similar weapon, add a hammer to the mechanism in a similar way. In other words, do a kind of recreation in an engineering sense of the same kind of weapon, and then see how the material handles a lot of activity, numerous discharges. And I do think the age of the weapon and the materials are going to be somewhat significant in terms of that argument. But a weapons expert could probably answer this in a fairly, clear way. According to Deadline on August 18, 2022, quote, earlier this week, Baldwin dinged the FBI forensics report, which is, I think, another way of saying criticized it, which concluded that the gun used in the accident could not have been fired without pulling the trigger, right? That has been the sort of seesaw tug of war all along, is that Baldwin is saying the gun fired itself and the forensics are saying something else. So what is the answer? Well, actually testing these new scenarios, which one imagines the investigators have been doing and are doing, that could and should fully and finally resolve these unknown but not unknowable areas. If you test, you really do get to the science of it, and that is indisputable either way. So the gun is being sent to the state's independent expert for further testing, and that's according to the prosecutors, and this is the bottom line. If it is determined that the gun did not malfunction, right, a gun of this type with a hammer subsequently added, just that, charges against Mr. Baldwin will proceed. So there you have it in black and white, and that's in regards to Baldwin. If the one side of the argument is that the revolver should never have been pointed at anyone nor fired, along with the potential failure to manage an allegedly unsafe set, the other side is the side Baldwin has been at pains to reiterate. How did a live round get on set? And I'm going to do a follow-up to this episode, kind of dealing with that question again, but given the new information we have right now. We know actually that there wasn't just a single live round on the set, but several, including one on Baldwin's bandolier. And so as soon as you say that, not how did a single live round get on set, but why were there half a dozen or more? How did that happen? Then I think you're starting to get the proper context of the story. During my analysis of this case, and I've put up something like 80 videos spanning several months, it appears Hannah may be the answer to that question. In other words, not only how did a live round get on set, but how did live rounds, plural, get on set. Hannah was handling live rounds offset, including apparently the night before the incident. So I don't think it's such a long walk in the park to figure out the answer to that question. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.